Good evening and welcome. Before we begin, I ask that you please turn off your cell phones or silence them. We also kindly request no flash photography in respect to our speakers and the flow of the program. The San Diego Museum of Art recognizes this land as the ancestral and unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation, whose stewardship of this region continues to this day. My name is Ariana Giron Villanueva, and I am a community engagement educator here at the San Diego Museum of Art. It is a pleasure to welcome you to SDMA Plus Nick Cave, a conversation on art and identity. This program is presented as a part of the Docent Guest Lecture Series and was made possible by the generous support of the Nissan Foundation, so thank you. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Maruja Baldwin Executive Director and CEO of the San Diego Museum of Art, Roxana Velasquez.
Thank you, Ariana, and thank you so much for doing this, for being here. I'm so excited to see you all. What a pleasure, what a joy, seriously. And as I was just speaking 2 seconds ago with Nick, this museum doesn't stop. You know, we are all over, but the most important thing we do these things for all of you, so you could feel the power of art and the meaningful programs that we all plan for you all. So let me applaud you for being here. It's truly a great pleasure, as I said, to see many of you here tonight for what promises to be a vibrant and inspiring conversation with one of the most imaginative and influential artists working today. We are deeply honored to welcome Nick Cave, an artist whose work has transformed how we understand material, movement, identity, and the ways communities come together through art. Nick Cave is internationally celebrated for his Soundsuits, those extraordinary kaleidoscope forms that command space, whether they are worn, performed, or encountered as sculptural objects. His practice moves fluidly across sculpture, performance, installation, dance, fashion, and social practice, dissolving boundaries and inviting us into a truly multi-sensory experience. Born in Missouri and trained as both a visual art and a dancer, Nick Cave brings a rare physicality and rhythm to his works. Every piece feels alive with gesture and possibilities. Beyond the studio, he is a dedicated educator and community collaborator. Through public works and large-scale participatory projects, he uses art as a catalyst for healing, connection, and collective expression. And don't we need that today? His exhibitions have been featured in major museums around the world, and his work continues to shape contemporary conversations about race, identity, and the transformative power of creativity. Tonight, we are privileged to hear directly from him, to learn about his process, his vision, and the questions that drive his remarkable practice. And guiding this conversation is our very own Director of Community Engagement and Education Programs, Deidre Guevara, whose leadership, passion for collaborative community center work make her the perfect partner for this dialogue. So I have to say that we are so delighted to have you, Nick Cave, to have you all, but also we treasure in our galleries the wonderful work Rescue that entered this collection in 2022, and we are absolutely we feel your presence through that gorgeous piece in the American galleries. So thank you for being here through your art, through your presence, and now through your words. Welcome to the stage, Deidre Guevara and Nick Cave.
Hello again.
Hi.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Nick, once again for accepting being in San Diego this evening. We were even joking that it was kind of complicated that you're coming from Chicago, windy, cold Chicago, to sunny California, and it's been raining, but this morning there was the sun over there. We made that happen for you. I mean, California never fails. So, through these days, we've been talking about your art. It's been a pleasure having the opportunity of get acquainted to you. And every time that you start sharing about your life, your history, your artwork, it is really, I discover new layers. However, I think I need to start by currently you're working in an exhibition that is going to open in Washington, D.C. It's about to open, but it took you 10 years to decide how that exhibition is going to look like. And probably the most complicated part is because it's about you. It's about your life. It's about your trajectory. So you've been doing 10 years of self-examination in order to share who is Nick Cave. Do you think you can share with us from Missouri to Chicago and now to Palm Springs, who is Nick Cave?
Oh my God. I don't know who that is. Well, I'm one of 7 boys, all 1 year apart. Like, what was my mother thinking? Like,
I know.
it's amazing. And she's an amazing woman. And, you know, I'm very close with my family. She comes from a family of 13. So she's the first of 13. But, you know, I was raised in a family that was very loving and that never got in the way of what any one of us was interested in doing. You know, I think as a kid, you know, I was always drawing and sort of making stuff. And so I think for, you know, my parents, it was, you know, they sort of knew that I was one of the boys that they didn't have to sort of pay close attention to, when maybe a number of other ones needed a little bit more structure. I was like drawing. So she was like, he's fine, let me focus over here. So, but you know, not getting in the way of that as a way of, for me, sort of being sort of settled and sort of restful. And so, you know, did that, it was in high school, I was, you know, in arts club, and it's my instructor in high school that said, I think you need to go to art school, and so I said, okay. And then I told my parents, and they were like, okay.
Okay.
Like, what does this mean? And so then I went to the Kansas City Art Institute. And, you know, and just being in that sort of world, in that, to be around like 300 sort of arts, creative students and people, and just in that environment was so liberating and so sort of just refreshing. And you know, I, you know, had, you know, pink hair and just my mother was just really concerned. But I said to her, I said, I'm not drinking, I'm not smoking, and so I don't think this really is something you should, I'm gonna
Worry about?
I'm gonna work through it. And so then, but there I studied, the fine arts and really focused really in sort of fiber and material studies, and then also was studying dance at the same time. So I was really sort of using these sort of two sort of very pivotal sort of pathways to help sort of build the foundation. I was making things. I was, creating happenings on the streets. I was, would make objects, whether or not they're costumes, I don't know what they were, but I would just sort of round up 30 of my colleagues, and then we would sort of parade, in various parts of the city, and which was, for me, I just sort of thought about this idea of, my canvas is outside of the institution, it's in sort of the public sort of space. Not knowing really at the time that I was really collaborating, but I was, to be able to sort of to rally a group of people together and to sort of say, this is what I need to do, was, part of a practice, in the mid-'70s that was, just what everybody did. And then, from there, after undergrad, I, was a little irresponsible.
Well,
coming out of school, not sure. It's weird when the rug is pulled out from underneath you and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this degree? Phone being disconnected, my mother really was very upset. Like, you have got to get a job.
And so what was it?
Get focused. And so I did. And so I, really pulled my portfolio together, went to Macy's and was hired as a visual coordinator display, which was perfect.
Of course.
Because, I was able to do these installations in the windows. So it was like, oh my God, and I could wear blue jeans and a t-shirt, which oh my God, that's everything. And so I did that and then went from there to Hallmark and worked for a year. Wasn't really for me. And then I went to grad school, Cranbrook.
Okay.
Which, really changed my life. Cranbrook and Detroit was such an amazing pair. And so was there at Cranbrook. It was really amazing. It was really worked with amazing professors that just really pushed me really, really hard. It was hard in terms of just, the level of commitment is really something that you have to desire. And I worked I was working for myself, but I was really working to impress my professors and it was really incredible. And, at my closing sort of meeting with my professor, he said, oh, by the way, you have a teaching job in Chicago at the School of the Art Institute. And so that's why I'm in Chicago. So, hard work does pay off sometimes, right? And so, I'm in Chicago, but at Cranbrook, I was really sort of doing large, sort of constructive sort of paintings. Started on the wall, but then sort of found their way to the floor. And so that was really the work that I was doing at Cranbrook, assemblage types of work. And then when I was hired at the Art Institute, it was in '91. And then 92, the Rodney King incident happened.
May I
And
ask you about Rodney King? Because it's impossible to talk about Nick Cave without mentioning Rodney King. And in all the interviews, or most of the interviews that I have seen, it's Soundsuits, which we're gonna get there. But there's maybe some members in this audience who weren't even born in 1992. But for you, it was a life changer what happened with Rodney King. And for the history of art, for contemporary art, what you produced was a game changer. So may I ask you, what happened with Rodney King in your own words? Can you describe to our young audience who maybe just know about it, but in your own words, what happened? Why was it so important that drove you into creating such a powerful piece as Soundsuits?
Well, I think as an artist of color, the harm on black bodies wasn't new for us. It's not like we were not sort of trying to communicate that for decades, but not being heard and not being listened to was very troubling. And this was the first time that we collectively saw it recorded on video, even myself. And so it was the beating, of the LA police force beating this black man in the most sort of vulgar and violent way, which was, for me, it was so devastating. I didn't really know how to even process it myself. And yet I'm in a university where my colleagues are all white. And so I really couldn't even share my feelings with them, nor were they willing to ask me how I felt. And so there was just a little sort of tension there too, because I think, how do we talk about it? And so for me, it turned my world really upside down. And so which, the beating led to the LA riots. And so, it was, again, a community that was in agony and pain, and was also calling out for help in this sort of rebellious sort of way. And so it really just continued to sort of expand, explode within itself. And so, I was living in a world where I thought my conscience was awake, and it really wasn't until that incident happened. And then all of a sudden, my entire practice just took a 360-degree sort of turn. And so I'm in the park in Chicago, just sort of sitting sort of quietly and thinking about, this incident. And I don't know, I started to collect, there was a twig on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, something said, you must collect all the twigs in the park. So then I'd go home and get a cart and come back and start collecting all this material. Not knowing why, but I started to build this sort of sculpture, I thought. And then I realized I could put it on. And then the moment that I put it on, it made sound. And so that's how Soundsuits sort of came about, was through motion, through movement. But then, which led me to think about the role of protest. In order to be heard, you got to speak louder. And so that was the beginning of this sort of body of work that I wasn't even ready for, because I sort of just gave birth to a a direction that I was completely unfamiliar with, making this pretty much out of just impulse of having to sort of work through emotions. And then I started I think I made maybe a dozen Soundsuits that I sort of pushed in the closet for about a decade, because I really needed time to understand what it was that I was making and why. So, it took time, although I was still creating. I needed time mentally to catch up with the sort of the process. And then the moment that I sort of brought them out and brought them into the world, it just sort of blew up like overnight. I was like on the cover of magazines. I was just not quite there, like with myself, with all of it, the success of it all. But I knew when I saw the first one that my life would be different.
And Soundsuits were covered. Was there a reason why the upper part is covered?
They sort of, what I was thinking about was, I needed to somehow, protect my identity, my spirit. So I concealed the entire body. But I was thinking first, in terms of shape. So I was thinking there's, the first twig suit is really, that's sort of what it was. But then I started to think about form very differently and the power of shape. And so that helped sort of dictate the direction. Scale was changing, but I was really making this hybrid, something other that concealed gender, race, and class, forcing you to look at something without judgment.
And so for you, you made the Soundsuits, you kept them for almost 10 years, you continue teaching. And then suddenly there's this breakthrough, there's this moment where they became famous and you became a personality in the art world and museums started acquiring your work. How was that transition from doing something very personal, sitting in the park and just collecting twigs, into becoming this magazine cover personality and being demanded to, or being requested to come to museums?
Well,
how did that happen? Who discovered Soundsuits?
You mean who discovered?
How were they discovered?
Beyond,
how they became?
Beyond
I mean,
me
they were in
discovering
the
it. Well, I had, group shows here and there, but my first solo show was at the Cultural Center in Chicago, and I had a friend that was going to New York, and he goes, I would like to take a portfolio of your work to this gallery that I think would be interested in your work. So I said, okay. And so they did. And, the gallery called me and said, we're, interested in your work. And I said, okay. And so I flew to New York. They didn't know that I was coming to New York, but I flew to New York and I went to the gallery, but they didn't know it was me. I needed to go there because I needed to I needed to feel the vibration. I needed to sort of see, what artists were they representing, and just sort of like, because I think prior to that I had so many friends that were with galleries that were having difficult relationships, and it was just messy, and I just was not interested in any of that. And so I was really being very cautious of what I was looking for myself. Then I came back, and then they called again and said, we would like for you to come here and talk to you about representing you. And so then I did, and then I met them. and then it's Jack Shaman Gallery. And, they said, what do you want for yourself? And I'm like, oh,
I know, always the complicated questions.
I've got to tell the truth. And I just said, I said I want to be famous. That's what I said.
Well,
I had to say it.
famous, checked.
Well, I had to say it. If it's what I believe, I have to say it. And so they said, okay, well, do what we can to make that happen.
Well,
And so then I get back to Chicago, and they come to my show in Chicago and said, we need images of all the work. And so they got all the images, and they sold the entire show out in Chicago. And so I am not quite prepared mentally for
what happened?
it was just so overwhelming. And then they're calling like, we need more work, and I'm literally working solo. And I'm like literally like crashing, like the emails, I just wouldn't even check the emails anymore because I was mentally not quite prepared. So there was moments I was like literally on the floor in my house, hysterical. And then all of a sudden something came over me, and I just sort of like, something said, well, this is what you asked for.
Exactly.
And
Careful
I
with what
literally
you
got
wish.
up off that floor and I got my act together in that moment. And so I realized I needed studio assistants and called the gallery and said, I need help with the work. I can't do it all by myself anymore. And they said, well, we will help you. And so that's when everything started to shift. I started to really, I had to grow up. Like overnight.
Growing pains.
Yeah, and it was like tough, but I had to do it, and I did it, and I stuck it out, and it was not easy. Yeah.
And that was 10 years afterwards. So where were you in that moment? Because it's a great evolution from something very personal, from doing a lot of introspective research and then producing Soundsuits into I want to be famous. So there's an evolution, and in your artwork, there must have been also an evolution. So what happened with this process of starting to collect, because that remains until today, for you collecting is something important.
I think that, the original Soundsuit was, a discarded object anyway. It was a twig. And so, then I started to think about, as I'm sort of making these other sort of works, I'm starting to think about sort of discarded materials and sort of excess. And that, we live in this world where there's so much excess. And so, I was thinking about sustainability and sort of reuse, repurpose as a way of sort of accumulating materials. And in high school, I was a weaver. Mm-hmm. I started weaving and taking weaving classes at the University of Missouri as a young kid. And so I understood how to build a cloth. And so that was really sort of me continuing that sort of work, is that, at the end of the day, the surface of the Soundsuit is about building a cloth, from 2D to 3D. And so, also I think it also comes from, growing up with not having much, and I knew how to make something out of nothing. And to be able to, I was that kid that, I made my mother's every holiday I made her a card. And, and I think from her sort of expression, from when I would give her that card, and she would just make it seem like it was the most extraordinary moment, was really an important sort of part of my sort of existence, because I that's what I sort of strive to sort of achieve, is that I want the work to have that kind of impact. May it be a sound suit, may it be collaboration, performance, that I wanted it to sort of have that kind of impact and influence. And so, it was really sort of, the discarded that have always been interested in, going to flea markets, understanding that my studio, my material resources is outside of an traditional art store. And it was really sort of going to the antique malls and sort of surplus sort of places and thrift stores. And that was my sort of, my way of sort of really creating the sort of materials that allowed me to build what I needed to build. And granted, at the time, well, I don't really sketch anyway. So even like, the sound suits, it's really just, it's all just really through impulse and, maybe finding objects and sort of relocating them on my body by moving them around the body and sort of feeling the energy, and then this is where it goes, and then sort of deciding what is the apparatus that needs to be built.
How interesting is that you're establishing that your source, your materials are discarded materials, and you collect them and you give them a new meaning, you recreate them, because something that constantly appears when in your work, in your concepts, what you talk about is beauty. The notion of beauty, the concept of beauty. You even mentioned once your mom saying beauty is what you have to defend yourself from this world. And just by having conversations with you yesterday, we were having this informal chat about your favorite museum, which is impossible to decide the favorite museum. But what is a constant in you is the notion of beauty. Aesthetically, create beautiful pieces of art. So when you think of something that it's been thrown away, when you create something, you recollect, you recycle, but then it turns into something beautiful, into something that you would like to acquire. So can you share with us a little bit more about this concept of beauty and how important it is for you?
Well, I think beauty for me has always been my sort of rebellion. It's always been sort of the device that I sort of use to push back. It goes against a lot of beliefs. It's also, for me, it's about optimism. It's about hope, but I think it's mostly about forgiveness. In spite of, I think as a person of color, in spite of the constant assault on Black and brown bodies, within that I have to somehow find forgiveness in order for me to do the work that I need to do. And that's hard, but I have to find it.
Well, in my opinion, you achieve it. Your work is pristine. It's beautiful, it's impeccable, and it's beautiful, beautiful. Talking about influences, we were just walking through the park, and I was sharing with you while we were looking at the facades of these buildings, of these museums that are all inspired in the Spanish Baroque. And I was sharing with you how I look at some of your artwork with these circling patterns and all these reliefs and texture that, for me, it's clear a Baroque influence. Do you agree on that? That you have influence from the Baroque?
Oh, totally. The Baroque, I'm looking, out here at the Spanish, it's extraordinary, but French. But I'm also looking at sort of couture and fashion and just the, level of decadence that sort of repelled me to another sort of level. It's otherly for the most part. It's I'm interested in excess and sort of, the gaudiness of just excess to the extreme that it's so gaudy and so ugly that it's fabulous. So, just how do we sort of just allow yourself to just sort of fully go there and
It's even more rococo. You go
yeah,
to the next
just
level.
go, but not necessarily gold.
Now, you just were with about 15 students in our Art of the Americas gallery, and there's rescue. As Roxana shared, the San Diego Museum of Art acquired rescue in 2022. And a lot of our docents are present here, our educators are here, our curators are here, and for us now it's a must-see in the museum. It's been on display since it arrived, and for us, there's not a docent who hasn't toured rescue. Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing about rescue? Do you mind giving us a guided tour? Okay, this is rescue, and this. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about rescue?
Let's see,
So docents, take
rescue.
note.
The rescue, the originals of rescue. Me and my partner Bob, we will. Sometimes we jump on a plane, one-way ticket, and we will then rent a van, a cargo van, and then we'll just scout all the way back to Chicago, the flea markets, the antique malls,
Wow.
and just look for stuff, shop for stuff. He saw this dog in the flea market, at one of the flea markets, and he goes, "You gotta come and look at this dog. It's amazing." I'm like, no. And he's like, "No, you gotta come and look at this dog. It's like so great." And so I'm looking at other things, not really like, okay, let me go look. And then I saw this Doberman.
Oh, it was a Doberman.
Yeah, reclining. And I just something about it was just, again, when I find objects, certain objects, it's really an impulse that somehow gets me, my heart starts to flutter. Mm-hmm. And so it's it's like a magnet. Somehow, for some reason, I need it. I have to get it.
I know.
I've missed a lot. I passed a lot of things up, let me tell you. Because I'm like, it's too much money. I'll come back around and see if it, and pick it up. And then it's gone, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? And so it was really that sort of moment when I bought him. And so as we're in the car, in the van, I'm like, I need a settee. He needs to be reclining on a settee. And we're having this conversation in the car, and he's like, "Why?" I said, "I don't know, it just makes sense." It's so I've got to find a settee as we're out looking for things, be open to that. So we go into this other flea market. And so the salesperson is talking to us, and we're like, can we bring our dog in?
What year was this?
Oh, I don't know. What year? I don't remember. 2012.
2012.
Maybe.
So it wasn't that, still there was some resistance for pets to go inside of the...
Yeah. And so then, Bob goes and brings in the Doberman, and we sit it on this settee, and the salesperson are like, "What is going on?" And then, and then I literally start building this sort of concept in my head in the moment. And I think that was the first time when my studio practice was shifting, that I was finding that I was building work in the moment. Like in the flea market, I would find something and I would just start building out the idea. And so, that exercise led me to, and so Rescue, we bought the settee Rescue, and I started to build this piece. And, what I was thinking about really from the beginning was, this idea of, you're my homie, like when I'm talking to my friends, like, you're my homie, like, yes, we're one. And so you're my dog, and sort of thinking about that, but thinking about dog as the idea of loyalty and the power within that. And then also I was thinking about, status and in terms of purebreds and just how that is perceived within society. And so then I wanted to sort of build, this sort of den-like structure where they find, this sort of safe sort of haven. And so that was really sort of the beginning of a new body of work that came out of that sort of experience.
However, ours is a French bulldog.
Yes.
And it has Mardi Gras beads. And it has bourbon bottles and some birds. So once again, the Baroque. Once again.
Yeah.
So
well, I think, again, just sort of, sort of creating, I think about like our dog at home, and there's like a particular chair that he finds himself in all the time.
Did you ever name them, like, the Doberman or the French?
Never.
No name.
No name.
But they
You
were
can
pets.
you can give them a name, but
I think we can leave that to our
Yeah.
visitors.
yeah, totally. And so, again, how do we create safe space? And so, when I'm creating that sort of den, sort of building around the sort of the furniture, it's really sort of creating a space that is protective, that is something other, that is sort of created because you deserve this kind of special place to sort of rest and to recline. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking, it's not really Mardi Gras beads, it's supposed to just sort of jewelry, and sort of, again, a way of sort of creating a network through sort of this infrastructure that is applied to the structure itself. And so again, I'm sort of thinking about like, taking, what is on the Soundsuits and moving it into sort of even more of a three-dimensional sort of field. And really thinking about the Soundsuits that sort of are, where the birds and the sort of and objects are sort of surrounding the body in this way, and so what I'm thinking about there is like this is a migration hub, where it's a form of gathering collectively.
There's some slang involved in rescue dog, D-A-W-G.
D-O-G. Mm-hmm.
So rescue. It started from a pleasant experience. You were doing shopping in a flea market, you found this incredible piece, and then you started elaborating, but it all came from something pleasant, something...
It came from just as, a sort of a social sort of network of community and my brothers and just the sort of collective sort of thought, and then again, just the loyalty around friendship and what that means. And
However, the title for me evokes rescue. I would think the other way around. So you brought it into turning it into a safe space. So I evoke the dog may be rescued. Someone is being rescued, and there's a safe space that is being created for this particular dog. But it seems that it never was. The creation process never doesn't have any kind of history or an anecdote or anything that relates into someone being rescued. It's just
Right, no.
you created, and it's more fraternity, it's more community, and it's a
Yeah.
safe space. However, the music. Today you were asked if you could think of a piece of music for rescue, and you were talking something more like calm, something, and I was saying, well, I was thinking New Orleans, and I was thinking, once again, because of Mardi Gras and the beats, that it's not related with that. So,
Right. And that's okay.
were you able to think about some kind of music that could
You know, I think about
describe
like,
rescue?
you know, he is sitting on like a bar chair.
Okay.
So I'm thinking like, I'm thinking like, I mean, that chair is so amazing. But I'm thinking like basement. So I'm thinking like, a speakeasy if I have to think about music. It's like, soft jazz or something of that sort.
Nice. When I met you for the first time, you said that every time you were in an event, in a museum event, you always look at the audience. Well, now we can see who's here, but you said that you like to look at the audience, and if you didn't see diversity, then it meant that institution had some work to do. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was such a powerful concept. Do you mind elaborating it a little bit, and do you mind sharing?
Well, I think it really sort of is if I'm asked to do a project at a museum, and if I do a lecture, and I'm sort of like, even here, let's use this for example. Mm-hmm. I could be, this could lead to something, this conversation right now. And so I have to sort of like, if I could, raise the lights, I need to see who's out here. Well, if I don't see myself out there, how are we going to do a project together? And so and so it's also, I have to also take what is my responsibility in sort of making that happen and to change what I see. And so that's what I mean. And that's what we have to do.
And of course, this is a biased question, mm-hmm. because you introduce yourself as an artist, but also as an educator. You are a teacher. And are they different aspects? Because your work comes from a very personal research. It's a lot of introspection. And a teacher needs to be focused on their students. So who is Nick Cave, the teacher? We have talked about Nick Cave, the artist. Why is it so important to do the teaching?
I don't have to teach, that's for sure. But I teach because I'm interested in the next generation of artists. I'm teaching because I know both sides of teaching and being an artist. And I was once a student myself. And so, as a teacher, and I really don't talk about me ever in the classroom. I really don't say I have a show coming up, none of it. They find out, but I don't really allow that to sort of interfere with my role as a professor. but my role as a professor is to provide guidance, to give direction, and I teach at the grade level, so I have 2 years to get them to a place where they know how to trust themselves. So that's just 2 years. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done. I am a very generous teacher, but, you know, like when I'm away, they're happy. When I come back, they're like, oh my God, he's coming tomorrow. So they're like nervous, stressed out because we have a critique or something. But my thing is that it's, as long as you're working, then, you know, we're gonna have a great relationship. It's when you're not working. And so, you know, failure is learning, it's success, it's what has to happen. It's never the first idea, it's the best idea. You know, it's hard, it's emotional. It's like I feel bad when somebody cries. And I'm like, oh.
But you're failed.
But then I give them 10 minutes. I let them for 10 minutes and I'm like, you've got to get back up and get back in it. So, but it, you know, it's really sort of the next generation. I'm curious to how they think and about processes and sort of resolving sort of problems and sort of bringing clarity to the work. And for them to be able to stand up for what they believe in and stand behind their work. You know, it's really the goal. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 years to do that, and then there's the thesis, and then, you know, it's amazing what happens within the last semester, because we're like in doubt for the most part. Like, I don't know if it's going to happen. Things are not aligning, sort of falling into place, and then all of a sudden, everything. The ones we thought were going to be left behind somehow pull up.
They arrive.
And it's like amazing. And so, you know, everybody clicks in at different moments in times. But we are very much about, you know, not leaving anyone behind. You know, everyone's going to arrive at the place at the same time. So it's great.
Now, you teach at the School of the Art Institute. Mm-hmm. That is one of the top art schools in the country, probably in the world. And of course, you have certain level of students, but you do also a lot of community work. You also work, would you like to share with us a little bit more about what you do with the community, about the importance? Because you have stated how important it is to go and work with the community and to have also to be accessible to artists who probably, or to art students who probably are not on those elite schools.
Yeah. Well, you know, Chicago, we live in a building that's called Facility. In the front of the building resides 3 storefronts. So it's glass from really the foundation all the way up to the roof. And so these 3 storefronts are exhibition spaces that we program, where we create 3 shows a year. Mm-hmm. And those 3 shows a year really are created by, you know, if I have an exhibition and I'm working with the preparators and I'm like, what do you do? And, you know, a lot of them are artists, and I'm always looking at portfolios and not doing the installation, just creating, just really sort of interfering with the timing of things, but we get it all done. Trust me, on time. And so then, you know, it may be somebody's work that I find to be interesting, and so we'll offer an exhibition, or it may be that when we were in COVID, my grad students didn't have a thesis show. And so for an entire year and a half, they all got to install in the windows solo.
Okay.
And so, we will do that. But, facility also is a place where we call and response in the moment. When we are in crisis, the world's in crisis, we can respond in the moment in the windows. So we will be at dinner like, oh, we've got to talk about what's happening right now. So we will then create a video, or we may be plastering the front of the window with the statement. All artists that are showing in the exhibition spaces know that we may intervene in any given moment, depending on what is going on, and if we have to respond, we can. So, that. But, when I'm doing solo projects, for the most part, I'm also interested in outreach. Mm-hmm. So it's not just an exhibition in the museum. It's, can we do a performance component? And so how I work in that way is that I will bring a project to a city, but I will hire the city to build the project.
Okay.
So I never bring dancers, I never bring musicians, poets, no one. I hire everyone that lives here. And we go into a 2-week residency, and we build this amazing project. The only thing that I know is that what it has to be, the conclusion has to look like this. But the real work and the most extraordinary part is the building of the project. To be in residence and there's so many amazing artists that we meet along the way that, I'm interested in creating space of opportunity and possibility. We do projects where, the audience is, could be 3,000 people. Well, we work with, let's say musicians that maybe the biggest audience is 800. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't really get outside of their, where they live. And so to be able to create to recognize them and to fold them into a project and for them to see what is possible is everything to me, because, someone offered that to me once. And so it's really about that. And it's also really about that, it's amazing how community, you may be living in the same block with 6 amazing creative people and not even know it.
Yes.
And so that's also interesting. And that you don't have to wait to do something. You don't have to wait for an institution or a gallery to create something. Why can't we just make something happen? So it's again, reintroducing communities back to themselves and working in that capacity. So most of the time we're working with 300 to 500 people building a project. And it's really quite amazing.
Wow. So it seems that I am stealing the audience's time for questions. Should we go to some questions?
Lights up, is that what you're saying? So I can really see who's here now.
And see how much work we have to do.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
First of all, I'm really excited to see you here in our San Diego Museum of Art. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. You said that you were very interested in the future younger generations. What is exciting to you now about what you're seeing?
Well, what's exciting and what I'm seeing is how AI is coming into, their studio practice. And just, and I'm also seeing just the way in which they're making things. They're not really making with their hands as opposed to digitally. I have grad students that are, working with factories in China, and then, these three-dimensional sculptures are being delivered into the department. Because what's happening in schools is that, we have resources, but the resources allows you to build something this big, and that's just not going to work out when they really are trying to sort of realize their work at the scale in which it needs to be. So that's interesting how they are sort of making these sort of connections in that way and finding sort of solutions. But, for the most part, they are concerned about the things we're concerned about, and being activists and sort of rolling that into their practice. Yeah.
Should I stand up, sit down? Hi, Nick.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited
Sure.
to welcome you to San Diego. Thank you so much. So I'm trying to formulate this into a question, but when I experience your work, there is play, joy, irony, humor, but it's in such a radical form that it's almost like it isn't ironic and it isn't humorous. It's like transcendent. I experience a sense of going into another kind of consciousness or awareness of the world around me and experiencing your work. But what is your feeling about that sort of, that borderline that you're on with that joy and humor and irony and play and it to such a radical level? Is that making sense?
I'm not, what it's...
So the question is, what is the play to you? What is that joy to you? What is that expression to you that you are giving your audience in the work?
I think the play and it's without limitations, it's without restrictions, it's without boundaries. And so you're able to then just imagine what is possible. I don't know when the last time I've drawn anything, so I'm just sort of operating out of pure impulse and sort of like being extremely open to what may come in the process. I'm not looking for perfection, I'm just looking for the arrival of something that is unfamiliar, that is unknown. It's something that I can't necessarily like identify with. It's just through the exercise of doing that allows it to sort of, what I know is that it has to, it's just a feeling that it has to have. The outcome is what I don't know, but I'm open to whatever it may need to be. So I don't know if that helps, but.
We're speaking a meta language, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But there's just an engagement with the audience. It's not a passive experience to experience your work. It's like, you feel it.
Great, thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I was at your show at the Guggenheim.
Okay.
And there, we've talked a lot about your colorful, beautiful works. But we haven't talked about you do some radically different work as well in terms of your sculptures with a much darker edge, I would say, in the sense of maybe not darker, but I found it incredibly powerful, the messaging in that work. So there's a couple pictures, the head on the flag platform in the slides, but you did a lot of work that are more representational sculpture of hands and heads and in blacks and dark colors. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the inspiration in those works as well.
It's all bronze. Everything that you're saying is bronze. But me personally, I think all my work is dark. It comes from a dark place, let's say. But, you know, that's always been the fuel. I mean, that's what sort of sets me on fire. But, you know, that work, maybe it's chain reaction that you're talking about, where, you know, the hands are sort of connected like this. And so there were just this sort of collection. You know, I did an entire chain wall of these hands that were connected that way. And then on the floor were pillows and heads and gramophones that were oversized in bronze with like the fist attached here and then the gramophone. But it was really sort of speaking about just protest and again sort of and I think maybe that work was doing George Floyd. Who knows? I mean, it's always fucking something. But it's really sort of, again, me sort of just grappling with trying to say something that needs to be said in that moment. And, you know, just sort of thinking about like acts of defense, ways of rallying and sort of collectively coming together and, you know, what, you know, do I need the full body to communicate that, or is this sort of connection here enough for us to understand that, you know, this is about unity, this is about a collective sort of whole. And so, you know, that's really sort of the core of that work. And the gramophone, you know, sometimes it's on its head, so it's been silenced. And so positioning the work to communicate in a particular sort of way. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
My name is Corwin, and my question to you, well, I guess I'll start with, over the last several years, there's been an influx of so-called AI artists. And my question to you is, as somebody whose artwork is so physical, you know, you have so many sculptures, and as your work is so much rooted in like community and grassroots, how would you respond to somebody claiming to be an AI artist and to be on the same skill level as somebody who has spent years working on their arts and their vision and, you know, their community?
Well, you know, I think about AR, I think about VR. You know, I use a lot of VR in order for me to sort of, I mean, like my sculpture in New York, that was 26-foot bronze, you know, without VR, I would have never seen it and was able to understand proportion and scale. So I just think it all is a tool that has to be very sort of carefully sort of utilized. I don't think it's the artwork, but I think it can be used as a tool to move things forward and quickly. I mean, I think about bronze right now, and I think like we have really cut the middle person out altogether. So I'm working in Chicago, I'm working with foundries on the East Coast. We're on Zoom every Sunday morning from 8 till 10, and we're building sculpture. And so, that's just the way in which we're working today. And so I'm more sensitive to that it has to feel that the hand is a part of the building, the process. And so it's really just being very sensitive to what and how that is sort of, things are utilized and designed. Yeah.
In the process of teaching, are you using VR, artificial intelligence, like technology? Is it now being brought to the process of guiding art students towards how to maintain a balance between
Well,
creation?
I think that's what's, school is very different today. The studios are being reshaped in a very different way. So we really have to be on top of all of that. And all of that is folding into, that's just another part of the practices that we have to consider.
So, thank you so much. It's
Thank
been
you.
an honor. Thank you so much. We did it. Thank you.